Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Earlier in Year of the Crossover, we looked at real American heroes fighting and or teaming up with robots in disguise, courtesy of Image Comics. Today, we begin looking at a 4-part follow-up to that series from Devil's Due Publishing, who contributed to the previous story. Written by Dan Jolly, with art by E.J. Sue, Tim Seeley, Andrew Pepoy, and Jeremy Roberts, I'm taking issue with G.I. Joe vs. Transformers 2. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. Issue number 1's cover sees Optimus Prime standing next to Snake Eyes' battle mech, standing in front of some destroyed buildings. In the foreground is Duke, holding a broken rod with a tattered American flag tied to it. Wait a minute, I thought Michael Bay wasn't making any more Transformers movies. We open to 3 figures in shadow, sneaking towards a door in a building somewhere in Boston. Narration to the side exposits that 2 years previous, Cobra tried to conquer the world with subjugated Cybertronians, but were stopped by the newly formed G.I. Joe. Kind of omits the Autobots' contribution to the victory, doesn't it? Also, this story was published 1 year after its predecessor, but it takes place 2 years afterwards. Usually comics try to slow down time relative to ours, but whatever. 18 months ago, it said that Cobra was rumored to be starting up again, and Cybertronian tech started popping up, so the Joes started using it in their own equipment. 7 months ago, the team received intel that international weapons dealers had ties to the Dreadnoks, former biker gang turned Cobra associates. Why is the narration suggesting that the Joes only recently started utilizing Cybertronian technology in their gear, when they were clearly already using it before Prime and his crew took off? Do they not remember them showing off their fancy new mech suits? Scarlet, Beachhead, and some guy in a beret, come on, give me a break, I can't memorize every G.I. Joe character, bust in, and after Ripper, Torch, and Cutter give rather odd turns of phrase, seriously, what does "London to a brick you have" even mean? They reveal that they've been physically augmented into cyborgs and attack the Joes, only to be easily defeated off-panel. Seriously, one of them specifically targets Scarlet, and in the very next panel, he's kissing the ground. Heck, we don't even see how Torch is taken down, and the beret guy is nowhere to be seen. Wow, the pacing is off to such a great start in the first few pages, isn't it? Some of the others involved in the deal were caught off-panel, while others are in a covered truck taking off, with only Spirit standing in their way. Literally. But I guess their plan was for Jinx to be caught hanging off the side of the truck, and being distraction enough for Spirit to use a flying kick through the windshield, which will stop the truck. Somehow. Maybe Spirit just watched that buddy cop movie starring Jay Leno and Pat Morita and got inspired. I'm not kidding, that's an actual movie. Turns out the truck was carrying the Nolan Trilogy Batmobile, which fires on Roadblock, Gung Ho, and Bazooka. They're okay because I guess they have shielding. Maybe the artists wanted to make it seem so advanced that it looks like they're being hit without taking damage or something, but it just looks weird without some kind of impact effect on the shielding itself. Bazooka fires his, well, obviously, and blasts a hunk off the back of the tank. A Cobra Viper rises from the roof, firing from a stationary cannon, and the heavy team evade fire because no more shielding, I guess? That's when 2 mech pilots make him stop. Obviously, it's Snake Eyes crushing the weapon, but we have no idea who the other pilot is. Jinx, who, by the way, is never identified, so anyone not familiar with her will be clueless as to who she is, confirms that they've got the Dreadnoks, the buyers, and the hardware, so it's back to base to interrogate the Viper, referred to as a dangling Chad. Isn't hanging Chad the more common reference to that little circle that stubbornly stays attached to a hole-punch perforated piece of paper? Unless Dan Jolly just grew up in an area where dangling Chad was the more common nomenclature, and possibly the editor too. It's just weird is what I'm saying.
The next day in Portugal, Cobra Commander arrives at an estate to meet with Destro. Double C needs to finance a mission, and since Kickstarter won't happen for a couple of years yet, he went to the Scottish arms dealer. A private lab in Boston was fiddling around with Transformer tech, and they accidentally opened a wormhole to Cybertron. Seizing the portal for himself, the commander intends to appropriate the supercomputer Teletran 3, on which the portal is dependent. Unsurprised by the begging, Destro asks why he'd be interested in something that sounds like a fairy tale.
What exactly sounds so far-fetched to you? You were involved in the last story, to the point of driving Soundwave around like a freaking Gundam, controlling his cassette minions. And you knew that he was one of several alien robots. But I guess they just needed some kind of skepticism to set up their reveal, no matter how clunky it was.
As part of his expedition, the commander is using his ace in the hole, Starscream.
I bow to your will, Cobra Commander.
Because if you can't trust Cybertron's most deceitful Decepticon, who can you trust? The would-be tyrant explains that using Teletran 3, they can create their own hub of wormholes across the Earth, as it does on Cybertron. So far, the researchers have only managed a pinhole through which they can gain this kind of information. But once they obtain the supercomputer itself, they'll revolutionize both Cobra's megalomania and Destro's weapons shipment with instantaneous travel. The Scotsman is in, on the condition that both of them go to Cybertron personally, because trust issues. He tells an attendant, Wilson, to close down the house in preparation for his imminent travels. Wilson leaves, and in the following 2 pages that really could have been condensed into one, exits the mansion, jumps into the waters below, and instead of drowning, surfaces on a jet ski, impossibly dry. Didn't know he could park watercraft underwater. He rips off his face, revealing himself to be a Joe spy. "Hey, Dial Tone, you listening?" "Of course I'm listening. Chuckles, is that you?"
Really? Chuckles? Let's see here. Turns out that's not a random affectation, but an actual pre-established G.I. Joe character. I think I finally found a code name sillier than Quick Kick.
We jump to Cybertron, where narration quickly explains their whole Autobots versus Decepticons deal, and ever since Prime and his crew returned from Earth after millions of years, they've become resistance fighters on a planet dominated by the Decepticon Shockwave. Optimus, Ironhide, and Jazz avoid enemy fire from the Seekers to narrowly escape with a shipment of Enerjump cubes, which should last them until they can steal more. Shockwave isn't all that concerned, finding Prime's attempts at uprising an annoyance, as he has other matters to attend to.
Then why are you here? Shockwave's all about logic above all else, so why is it necessary for him to make a dramatic appearance at the scene of something he considers so minor?
Back on Earth, specifically Boston, 17 hours later, a truck full of Joes approaches an unimpressive building that suddenly has lights beaming through all its windows. Led by Lady J, the team bursts in to find Starscream and Cobra surrounding their portal device. They exchange fire, with Mindbender pleading for them to stop, trying to warn them before an explosion results in some form of electricity striking them all, and the next thing you know, they're on Cybertron. Fortunately, a planet populated by machines is habitable for humans, the evil ones trying to take Teletran 3. However, Mindbender states that it's destabilizing because of the grenade causing an energy surge and... Wait, what? Oh, there it is. Sheesh, you can barely see the thing that caused all this. Really, they should have made it stand out more. Anyway, T3 unleashes another burst of energy, seen enveloping Transformers of both factions across the planet. When the chaos settles, Cobra orders the Joes killed, but Lady J points out how stupid that is when they're on literal alien territory. This is a sentiment praised by Shockwave, arriving with a few other cons. He orders his troops to fire on them, but the tower begins to rumble, and crashing through the roof is a much bluer-than-normal Perceptor and Ultra Magnus, the latter of whom delivers suppressing fire, plugs a cord from his chest into the floor, and establishes a force field while the microscope bot fires on Starscream, which ties him with an energy rope of some kind.
That's new. Usually what I shoot at just blows up. But considering what I shoot at, I much prefer it that way.
They can tell the good humans from the bad since they've been briefed by Optimus Prime, and Perceptor links up with Teletran 3, much to his chagrin. The two Autobots were drawn by a severe temporal spatial disturbance, one that's tossed several Cybertronians on Earth across different time periods. If they aren't returned, terra firma will experience feedback akin to a nuclear holocaust echoing through time, washing the planet in fire every decade for 400 years, exterminating the human race.
But the animals and plant life will all be just fine, right?
Magnus can hold his shield for about 12 hours, but they need to finish the mission before then or else they'll be at Shockwave's mercy. With Perceptor operating Teletran 3, that leaves the humans to track down and retrieve the missing Transformers. For the good of the planet they kind of need to live on, Destro agrees. However, I want my people watching yours at all times. Yeah, because between arms dealers and terrorists, it's G.I. Joe that's historically been too sketchy to trust. Regardless of the offended commander, a truce between the two groups is established.
Together they are Jobra, which sounds like something Lady J might buy in the women's department of a clothing store.
But wait, there's more! Teletran 3, which apparently can feel embarrassment for its part in all this, says the four groups of Transformers went through a camouflage protocol, locking them into a vehicle mode common to whatever time period they're in. T3 was able to record parts of their energy signatures during transmission, so using that with some of Ratchet's equipment, Perceptor has, conveniently, crafted a bunch of tracking devices and disruption units that will reboot the bots so they can transform to robot mode again. Once all Cybertronians from a given era have been brought out of their stasis, they can return to the present. Somehow, they don't quite explain, so the first group is on their way.
You just gotta sit through these expositional cutscenes during every video game, don't you? Seriously though, are we sure this story wasn't originally going to be developed by High Moon Studios?
Much to Zartan's disgust, he, Lady J, and both teams' resident ninjas have arrived in the 70s, and among the bell-bottoms and leisure suits, they'll stick out like sore thumbs, so they need disguises, which they immediately have on the following page. They follow their tracker to a Cadillac belonging to a black man dressed like a stereotypical pimp who assumes the four are law enforcement.
Is that racist?
Yes.
A little bit.
No.
Between the teddy bear medallion and the one with SB inside some kind of pentagon shape, I'm wondering if this is supposed to be a composite reference character to various other properties, but I'm not going to waste time speculating. Anyway, Snake Eyes approaches with an Autobot emblem, and Jazz awakens in robot mode, scaring off his former owner, and wonders what's happened to him. Jay would explain, but it's a long story that makes her go into fits of insane giggles.
She giggles insanely, I laugh maniacally. It's not much, but it's a start of something, right?
She's not real, brah.
I will end you!
Though Jazz has already scanned her pulse and galvanic skin response to determine she was being genuine, so they'll fill him in on the way to their next target in Oakland. They're soon in a junkyard near a yellow AMC Gremlin.
I don't understand. This car is perfectly functional. Why would it end up here? Believe me, it's not that shocking.
Take that, American Motors Corporation of the 1970s. Even though the joke is kind of lost on anyone that isn't familiar with vehicle designs or can hardly tell what this particular model is, given how small it's drawn. But yeah, take that.
Speaking of not shocking, the car is actually Bumblebee, and after 5 minutes to catch him up to speed, they're off to find the other two signals.
Any more questions? Yeah, why does everyone get to transform into big fancy cars but me? This sucks.
Okay, in 3 years you get to be a slick-looking sports car. But you have to be in a Michael Bay film. Several of them, in fact. Not so wonderful now, is it?
Unfortunately, they've hit a snag. The next Transformer is in a less than isolated area about to be driven off by someone, and Jay isn't about to go with Zartan's idea of shooting him from afar and hiding the body. And the guy's dialogue here, asking why someone would have just left the car sitting there, suggests he's stealing it. Though that raises a few questions about how he could steal a car that's actually a sentient robot in stasis. Moving on. The lead Joe has an idea that can get them their latest find and take them to their final target. While driving Jazz, Jay drives alongside the supposed thief.
Howdy, sailor. I just love a man in a fast car. Catch me, and I'll show you how much.
Then she drives off.
If that had been me given that offer by Lady J, I would have just jumped out and started running. The car would have just slowed me down.
As she races down the street, her companions, reluctant and otherwise, follow behind in Bumblebee.
Grand. She gets to pretend she's in a Steve McQueen movie. Naturally, we're stuck in the soapbox derby car. Hey!
Who's Steve McQueen?
Just be fortunate that a certain Pixar movie wasn't out at the time of this comic's publishing, so he didn't confuse a famous actor of the era with a talking car voiced by Owen Wilson. Fitting as that may be, given the circumstances.
All three vehicles and their occupants eventually stop at a hangar with a plane and several cops inside. And even with the possibility of time-scorched Earth, Lady J isn't allowing for fatalities. She gets the driver she lured out of the car, calling him Kid, even though he kinda looks older than she is, and the hot rod is revealed to be a hot rod. Go figure. Meanwhile, Storm Shadow awakens the aircraft, the Decepticon Blitzwing. After a moment of clarity, he instinctually tries attacking the Autobots, but Lady J hits a switch on one of Perceptor's devices, and they're transported back to present-day Cybertron, leaving the officers and joyriding carjacker bewildered. Elsewhen, Roadblock, a Cobra soldier, Baroness, and Beachhead arrive in a different decade, where they're immediately treated to a pair of cars opening fire on one another with Tommy guns.
Closing the first issue. I have to say, the pacing was kind of rushed in several places, events occurring almost instantaneously between panels, leaving out details, and necessary though it was, it did get a little exposition heavy. But the premise is pretty fun sci-fi.
Issue number 2's cover features Wheeljack doing an homage to that old story Metropolis, no, not Superman's home, next to a nondescript man holding a Tommy gun.
Kevin Costner stars in The Unrustables.
And this first page picks up immediately where the last page of the previous issue left off, which is kinda weird. Usually with these multi-part stories, they have at least one panel or one page to establish things from the previous issue, if maybe with a few minor changes or something, but it feels like issue 1 ended with the first page of issue 2. While it maintains a certain flow if you're reading these back-to-back, it seems rather odd that they begin with Roadblock's keen eye for car models, saying the shooters were in a 1935 and a 1936 year cars, and appears that they're in Chicago. After narrowly avoiding another pair of vehicles, this time the police, the four duck into an alley. While Roadblock is rather excited given his apparent love of gangster movies, the unnamed Cobra Goon is not taking things well. Alien machines and teleporting to other planets are one thing, well, okay, technically two, but time travel is a whole other animal for him. Baroness suggests they blend in, find appropriate clothes, and even develop personalities, whereas Beachhead would rather avoid being seen altogether. There's one signal 10 miles away, four grouped together much closer, and one that's practically a stone's throw away, so it'd be better for the two Cobra lackeys to do what they're told.
If you expect me to act like some filthy commando crawling around rooftops and such, you can just forget it.
Meanwhile, at the Contradiction, the four overlook a gas station where several hoods are near their first Transformer target, a red truck with a blue trailer.
Gee, I wonder who that could be.
Beachhead has snuck off undetected, and some sound effects are shown of him knocking the goons out. As the others follow, he wakes one up for information, told that the boss, Tommy Fingers, acquired several boilers, I'm guessing he means the cars, and had several of them kept in a garage beneath his club. And in the next panel, he's tied up and unconscious with the others. Again, with skipping details. They decide to take a chance and awaken Optimus Prime.
Yeah, that's exactly who I knew it would be. Absolutely. I mean, it was so obvious. How could anyone not realize it was Optimus Prime and not Dinobot from Beast Wars? Shut up.
Prime asks what happened and where he is, but for some reason Beachhead wants him to answer a few questions. Did he forget they got the briefing on things from Perceptor before they left? Anyway, Prime saw Jazz get hit with one of those energy streams and tried to help. Next thing he knew, he's talking to these 4 humans. Beach informs him of the stakes of their mission, and Optimus transforms so they can roll out. The timid Viper asks if they make it out and change history, it'll be like none of what they do in this time will ever have happened. So what's the big deal if they get seen? Baroness's answer is for him to shut up.
Maybe time travel and causality are too confusing for her, and she's too proud to admit she can't formulate a reasonable counter-argument. Or maybe he's just stupid.
We take a quick look at Cybertron, where the tower is surrounded by Shockwave's forces, Blitzwing is tied up with Starscream, the returning Autobots are in vehicle mode for some reason, and Ultra Magnus estimates another 6 hours before his shield collapses. Back in 1937, Beachhead waits with Optimus Prime and the Viper, who's disappointed he was left behind by the Baroness in favor of the more logical choice of Roadblock.
What's your name, son?
I shouldn't tell you that, should I? I mean, you're a G.I. Joe.
I'm not going to ask you again.
It's, Percy.
Good. Shut up, Percy.
If that's short for Percival, you should have gone with Perry as a shorthand. At least then you could leech a little credibility off Dr. Cox from Scrubs.
I'm in charge, and I don't care about your opinion.
The aforementioned boss, Tommy Fingers, is boasting about his accomplishments with the club to a woman he has his eye on, the Baroness, who's looking a lot like Elizabeth Comstock from Bioshock Infinite. Give or take a pinky. While she dances with Tommy, Roadblock sits in with the band on the trumpet, under the name Miles Davis. After a half hour, he approaches the club's garage, asking the armed guards for a smoke. Instead of just shooting him for trespassing or, well, being black, because this is 1937 and these are extra bad people, they're distracted enough by his request that he knocks them out rather deftly, including this rather humorous panel of him punching a guy in the chest to some gray impact effect.
Hopefully Percy is right and their interference won't have any repercussions. Or else the real Miles Davis of this timeline might run into some serious trouble. But in 1937, I doubt these guys will think they were beaten up by an 11-year-old.
Baroness soon joins him, having slipped Tommy a Mickey and knocked out guards at the other garage entrance. As Prime wheels in, she says she managed to obtain from the gangster that 6 cars have been found in a rock quarry, and quickly put to use. The absentee transformer truck has been packed with dynamite and is being used for a later bank robbery. Unfortunately, Teletrain's 3 camo protocol is so good, Prime can't tell who the 4 cars in the garage are. Percy seems confused why they don't activate them anyway, or why the dynamite even matters.
They might be Decepticons, knucklehead.
Consider the aliases used by both G.I. Joe and Cobra members. Is that really so much of an insult? All he would need is a gimmicky costume, and Percy could use Knucklehead as a code name. I refer you back to Chuckles.
Beyond the fact they could be awakening enemy robots, the 6th Transformer could be damaged by the explosives if they happen to be set off, preventing them from returning to Cybertron. Percy's slow-wittedness and need for clarification worked in favor of a Decepticon who was playing Robopossum. He fires on Prime while alleviating Beachhead of the badge devices and awakens his fellow Stunticons. As Prime busts out with his human companions, someone, possibly Baroness, says that one bot may not have been locked in vehicle mode due to a random factor in the accident that caused the entire crisis in the first place.
The random factor known as writer's convenience?
The Stunticons are in hot pursuit as Prime heads towards the final bot, exchanging fire with their enemies as they come up with a plan B.
There's our plan B. B for bridge.
Apparently, they're barreling towards Sesame Street. The Joes take out the support beams, but screwing over Depression-era Chicago infrastructure proves only a temporary measure as the cons climb up and close in just as they near the 6th robot. 2 goons are sitting in the front seat witnessing the firefight and flee just as Baroness opens fire, managing to avoid the ensuing fireball caused by the detonation of the TNT. She taps it with an activator badge and awakens, I'm thinking Motormaster if the other 4 are Stunticons. As they teleport away, Cobra's leading lady figured, hey, Sidewinder missiles don't phase alien robots. Why would a truck full of dynamite?
Because Optimus, one of said alien robots, expressed concerns about it? But hey, what does he know?
The comic ends with a preview of the next issue, seeing another mixed team ready for their time mission, gazing upon a wrecked landscape with even larger Transformers roaming through the devastation.
Well, looks like it finally happened. Michael Bay went one epic explosion too far. Anyway, this story is pretty different from its predecessor.
The first issue is about 40 pages long, but doesn't feel like it needed to be. I think they could have used less clunky exposition, and some of the pages felt underutilized, with big panels largely intended to fill up space, it seems. And when things get going, the progress feels very episodic. The mission for each issue is so far the same, only time periods changing. Though they seem to have started at the same time, we focus on one team apiece. Probably for the best, since it'd get way too confusing if they hopped between timelines in each issue. But obviously, the teams don't finish their mission at the same time, as we saw the first team chilling in issue 2. Unrelated, but it's kind of weird how Duke and Wheeljack were fairly prominent on the covers of these issues, with no sign of them in the stories themselves so far. One silhouette notwithstanding.
But we've got 2 more eras and several more bots to go before Earth is saved from time fire. Or something. Tune in next week where we conclude this story and see if it measures up to the first one. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.